August 4th, 1577. A church service in Bungay, England is shattered by the appearance of a massive black dog with eyes of flame. In seconds, 2 people lie dead, their necks snapped backwards. Minutes later, at another church, it claims 2 more victims before vanishing, leaving behind mysterious scorch marks that can still be seen centuries later, and a legacy of sightings that continue to this day. Welcome to the In-Between. I'm Carol Ann, and today we're tracking down one of the most terrifying legends from old British folklore, the phantom beast known as the Black Shuck. East Anglia, a region of England that most Americans probably couldn't find on a map. But this ancient landscape with its misty marshlands and crumbling churches holds a secret that's been terrorizing locals for centuries. And unlike most folklore that fades into history, this particular terror is still stalking the countryside today. Now, before we dive into the nightmare fuel that is the Black Shuck, we need to understand something about British folklore. They have this thing about black dogs. I'm not talking about your neighbor's friendly black lab. These are something else entirely. Almost every county in Britain has its own version of a phantom black hound. In Somerset, they call it the girt dog. Up in Yorkshire, it's known as Barghest. The Welsh border has the black Vaughan. Even the Isle of Man has its own version called the Matty Dhu. But none of these spectral canines have quite the reputation of Black Shuck. The name itself should give you a clue about what we're dealing with. Shuck comes from the Old English word skucka, which means demon or fiend. That's right. This isn't just a ghost story about a big black dog. This is a tale about a creature so terrifying that the Anglo-Saxons literally named it Demon Dog. And while these phantom black dogs are spotted all over Britain, Black Shuck seems to have carved out his own territory in East Anglia, particularly around Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, and Cambridgeshire. Think of it as his own personal hunting ground. And unlike most folklore creatures that stick to the deep woods or abandoned ruins, Shuck has the habit of showing around exactly where people are. Ancient roads? He's there. Churchyards? Absolutely. Lonely crossroads in the middle of the night? That's prime Shuck territory. He's been seen on beaches, in graveyards, and even, as we'll get to in a minute, inside churches during Sunday service. But here's where things get really interesting. Most folklore tends to fade over time, becoming nothing more than bedtime stories to scare children. But Black Shuck? He's still actively terrorizing people today. We're talking about sightings from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and yes, even into the 21st century. And unlike most paranormal encounters that happen to one person alone in the dark, some of Black Shuck's most famous appearances happened in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses. In fact, one of these appearances was so well documented, it changed the town of Bungay forever and made sure that Black Shuck would never be forgotten. The memory is so indelible that the citizens of Bungay decided to make lemonade from lemons and in 2022 started the Black Shuck Festival. Kids in demon dog costumes, artists showing their Shuck-inspired creations. It's like watching a town reclaim its nightmares and turn them into sweet dreams. You can check out their festival website in the description later, but first, let me tell you about the morning that started it all. Because while today's Bungay might celebrate with street food and face paint, that fateful Sunday in 1577 served up something far less appetizing. The date is August 4th, 1577. The townspeople of Bungay are gathered in St. Mary's Church for their Sunday morning service, probably thinking about anything except imminent doom. But Mother Nature has other plans. A storm rolls in, and not just any storm. We're talking Old Testament levels of fury here. According to Abraham Fleming, a clergyman who documented the events just days after they happened, this tempest brought
darkness, rain, hail, thunder, and lightning as was never seen the like.
The congregation huddles together as thunder shakes the very foundations of the church. Lightning flashes illuminate the stained glass windows, creating an eerie light show that has everyone on edge. But then something happens that makes them forget all about the storm. There, in the middle of their sacred house of worship, appears what Fleming describes as
a black dog, or the devil in such a likeness.
This isn't some wet stray seeking shelter. The creature is described as having an absolutely horrible appearance, so bad that it makes the congregation believe Judgment Day has finally arrived. Before anyone can react, this demonic hound tears down the center aisle of the church
with great swiftness and incredible haste.
It passes between two people who are kneeling in prayer and, I kid you not,
wrings the necks of them both at one instant, clean backward.
They die right there on their knees. But Shuck isn't done. The beast then attacks another member of the congregation, leaving him, as Fleming puts it,
drawn together and shrunk up, as it were a piece of leather scorched in a hot fire.
Amazingly, this third victim survives, although I'm betting his church attendance is never quite the same after that. Just minutes later, Black Shuck appears at Holy Trinity Church in Blytheburg, about 12 miles away. Same storm, same terror, same results. The demon dog bursts through the doors, kills 2 more people, and then flees, but not before leaving his mark on the church doors. Those claw marks are still visible on the north door today, what locals call the devil's fingerprints. The attack is so violent that it supposedly causes the church steeple to collapse through the roof, though skeptics will tell you that it's probably just the lightning. Yeah, because lightning strikes that can take out a church steeple are so much more comforting than demon dogs. The people of Bungay never forgot what happened that day. The town's coat of arms now features Black Shuck himself. There's a weather vane in the shape of the devil dog. The local football team? They're called the Black Dogs. It's like they decided that if you can't beat them, at least put them on your merch. But before you write this off as just another medieval tall tale, consider this. We have multiple contemporary sources documenting what happened. The story appears not only in Fleming's detailed account, but also in the records of several other churches and even in the official chronicles of the time. Whatever prowled through those churches that stormy Sunday morning, it left an impression that's lasted nearly 450 years. And maybe that's exactly what Black Shuck wanted, because this wasn't his first appearance, and it certainly wouldn't be his last. So what exactly does a demon dog look like? Well, that depends on who you ask and when you ask them. Because unlike your typical cryptid that has a fairly consistent description, Black Shuck seems to be a master of keeping people guessing. The most common description? Picture the biggest, blackest dog you've ever seen. Now make it bigger. We're talking anywhere from the size of a large mastiff to, and I'm not making this up, as big as a horse. His fur is described as shaggy and matted, the kind that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it's the eyes that really seal the deal. Most witnesses describe them as blazing red, like burning coals in the darkness, though sometimes they're reported as green, and occasionally, in a particularly weird twist, there's only one giant eye right in the middle of his head, like some kind of canine cyclops. Interestingly enough, For a creature his size, Black Shuck moves like a ghost. No footprints, no sound, nothing. Imagine a horse-sized dog somehow moving in complete silence. Witnesses report seeing him run alongside their cars, keeping pace even at high speeds without making a single sound. No panting, no claws clicking on pavement, just silence. And Shuck definitely has his favorite haunts. He's particularly fond of ancient pathways, crossroads, and churches, places that folklore traditionally considers boundaries between our world and whatever's on the other side. It's almost like he's patrolling these liminal spaces, these in-between places where reality gets a little thin. But here's the amazing part, and this is what makes Black Shuck different from your typical spooky story. He doesn't always show up to cause harm. In fact, some encounters with him are downright protective. The same creature that bursts into churches and snapped necks has also been known to guide lost travelers home and chase away those who mean harm to innocent people. Take this story from the 1800s. A woman walking alone at night suddenly found herself being followed by a massive black dog. But then she passed a group of rough-looking men who, she later overheard, had been planning to rob and assault her. The only reason they didn't? The enormous black hound walking beside her. When she reached her home safely and turned to thank her protector, he'd vanished into thin air. This Jekyll and Hyde routine makes Black Shuck particularly perplexing. Is he a harbinger of death? A guardian spirit? Both? The locals have learned to take a better safe than sorry approach. If you see a giant black dog on a lonely road in East Anglia, it's probably best not to stick around long enough to figure out which version you're dealing with. But even with all these varying descriptions and behaviors, there's one consistent thread that runs through almost every Black Shuck encounter: the feeling of otherworldliness. Whether he's terrorizing churchgoers or protecting lone travelers, there's always something unmistakably supernatural about him. This isn't just some oversized stray or escaped wolf. There's something ancient and powerful at work here, something that's been stalking the misty fields and ancient roads of East Anglia for centuries. And speaking of centuries, while that church incident in 1577 might be Black Shuck's most famous appearance, it's far from his last. In fact, some of the most intriguing encounters happened well within living memory. Now, you might think that in our modern age of smartphones and security cameras, a horse-sized demon dog would have a hard time keeping a low profile. But Black Shuck didn't get the memo. If anything, the 20th century seemed to make him bolder. Let's start with what happened in Walberswick in 1945. A couple had rented a little hut between the salt marshes and Dunwich Forest. Not exactly prime real estate, but hey, it was post-war Britain. People made do. One night, they are startled by something pounding on their door. And I don't mean a polite knock. We're talking about the kind of pounding that makes you wonder if someone's trying to break down your wall with a battering ram. When they peek through the window, there it is. A massive creature with matted black fur and one blood-red eye hurling itself against the door. The terrified couple does what any rational people would do. They pile every piece of furniture they own against the door. But that doesn't stop whatever that thing is. It spends hours throwing itself against the walls, then leaping onto the roof, pacing back and forth like some kind of nightmarish guard dog. Then comes the howl. Now, I've heard people try to describe the sound, but they always struggle. The couple says it starts low, building to a crescendo that shakes the entire hut, then drops to frequencies so deep they seem to bypass their ears and vibrate straight through their bones. After one final endless howl, everything goes silent. They wait until dawn, because nobody in their right mind is going outside before then, and find massive claw marks scoring the door and walls. Windows are shattered. The roof looks like something has been dancing the cha-cha in steel-toed boots up there. However, in the soft, sandy soil around the hut, not a single paw print. Nothing. Just their own tracks from the day before. Fast forward to 1972. Graham Grant is working the early morning shift at the Gorliston Rescue Headquarters. He spots what he thinks is a large black dog on the beach about a quarter mile north of him. Nothing too weird about that, right? Except this dog suddenly vanishes. Not runs away, not hides behind something, just blinks out of existence, like someone hit a cosmic light switch. But my favorite modern encounter happens in 1988 on the lonely road from Norwich to Bauberg. A cyclist, and remember, this is way before everyone is kitted out in GoPros and LED gear, is pedaling along the dead of night when something massive and black overtakes him. It's running alongside his bike, and yes, it has those signature glowing eyes. Before our cyclist can properly panic, the dog suddenly charges ahead and blocks the road, forcing him to stop. Seconds later, a car comes screaming around the corner way too fast, right where the cyclist would have been. The car seems to hit the dog, but Shuck just fades away like the morning mist. Our cyclist later says,
"All I can say is that on that night, the dog saved my life."
These aren't just campfire stories passed down through generations. These are first-hand accounts from people who are probably still alive today. People with jobs and mortgages and absolutely no reason to make up stories about giant phantom dogs. And the sightings haven't stopped. The pattern in these modern sightings is fascinating. While Shuck still shows up at churches and graveyards, he seems to have developed a particular fondness for roads. Maybe he's adapting to the times. After all, why haunt old footpaths when you can terrorize the A149? But there's something else that's happening here too. More and more often, he's showing up not to harm, but to help. It's like East Anglia's most terrifying resident is slowly transforming into its most intimidating guardian angel. But before you start hoping for your own protective phantom pooch, remember this: Black Shuck doesn't exactly give you a warning about which version you're gonna get. And trust me, you don't want to flip that particular coin on a dark night in Norfolk. So why is this massive phantom hound still prowling around East Anglia after all these centuries? Well, to understand Black Shuck, we need to zoom out, way out, because this isn't just some random ghost story. We're looking at something that might be as old as human civilization itself. See, pretty much every ancient culture had their own version of a supernatural canine guardian. The Egyptians had Anubis, that jackal-headed guy who guided souls to the afterlife. The Greeks gave us Cerberus, the three-headed hound guarding the gates of Hades. And up in the Norse lands, they had Garm, who kept watch over the entrance to their underworld. Notice a pattern here? Dogs weren't just man's best friend. They were basically cosmic security guards. But in almost every one of these traditions, these supernatural dogs show up in what scholars call liminal spaces. Those in-between places where the normal world starts to get a little fuzzy. Crossroads, bridges, shorelines. Wouldn't you know it, those are exactly the kinds of places where people keep running into our boy Shuck. Remember all those sightings on ancient pathways and old Roman roads? Turns out there might be a reason for that. Some researchers think Black Shuck follows what are called ley lines, these supposed energy pathways that crisscross the British landscape, connecting ancient sites. It's like he's patrolling some kind of prehistoric supernatural highway system. Now, you're probably thinking, there's got to be a rational explanation, right? And sure, skeptics have tried. Some blame ball lightning for the Bungay church incident, which maybe explains the scorching, but last time I checked, lightning doesn't typically have glowing red eyes or run down church aisles. Mass hysteria? That might work for one incident, but we're talking about hundreds of sightings across centuries. The really wild part? Modern science might actually be backing up some of the old legends. You know how witnesses always talk about the feeling of this overwhelming sense of dread before Shuck appears? Turns out there are certain electromagnetic frequencies that can trigger exactly that feeling in the human brain. Where do these frequencies tend to be strongest? Along fault lines and, you guessed it, those same ancient pathways where Shuck likes to hang out. Some places take the threat seriously enough that they've actually put up barriers. There are caves in the Norfolk coast that have been sealed off, supposedly to protect bat colonies. But ask the locals and they'll tell you those bars aren't keeping anything out. They're trying to keep something in. The British military even got involved at one point during World War II. They actually used the legend of Black Shuck in their coastal defense plans. They figured that if German spies were lurking around, stories of a massive demon dog might keep them from poking around certain sensitive areas at night. Talk about weaponizing folklore. But maybe we're all missing the point. What if Black Shuck isn't just some random supernatural entity? What if he's something more fundamental? Think about it. Here's this creature that shows up at boundaries, at crossroads, at moments of transition. Sometimes he's terrifying, sometimes he's protective, but he's always marking some kind of threshold. It's almost like he's not just haunting East Anglia, he's guarding it, standing watch over the boundaries between this world and whatever lies beyond. And maybe that's why he's still around when so many other legends have faded away. Because as long as there are boundaries to guard and thresholds to watch over, there's still a job for an otherworldly watchdog to do. So what do we make of Black Shuck? A demon dog that's been terrorizing and protecting East Anglia for centuries, sometimes on the same day. Just like the locals who live with this legend, perhaps we need to accept that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. And if you found this tale of supernatural guardians fascinating, then click right here for more strange and unexplained craziness. Trust me, you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.